welcome back. You know, what I love best? Having best friends on the show as guests. Today, got someone I absolutely adore, a person I've been working with for many years, a wonderful writer, a wonderful person. My name's Vin Dacquino. Her name is Janus Adams.
Hi, Vin.
Janus.
We're doing this.
We're doing this, finally.
Yeah.
We were back and forth. You know,
I know.
You're up there in God's country now. And,
Is that what you call it?
that's right. And it's, you know, to get you back here is always a treat.
Yes.
And you have been writing and writing and writing.
I have.
And so have I. I miss those days when we would sit and talk about each other's works all the time.
I know.
But we still do. Unfortunately, it's mostly by telephone.
By phone.
I know. So you just put out a new book, and you have several others. So I would like, if possible, let's see some of those covers of some of those books.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
Here we go. And this is your
That's
newest.
Sister Days. That's a reprint coming out right now. Or a new
And-
edition.
Okay, so that's
And then
Sister Days. And
Sister
now,
Days is a history of African American women across really before the United States, but looking at a panoramic history of African American women, a herstory. And let's see what comes up
Okay,
next.
you have another book?
Freedom Days.
Freedom Days, yes.
Freedom Days is really, I should say Sister Days is great for Mother's Day, but Freedom Days is great for Father's Day. Sister Day is great for Mother's Day. Freedom Day is great for Father's Day. And what I particularly loved about doing Freedom Days is that it is, yes, it's a history of the civil rights era, and especially in this period of time that we're going through right now, where there are some people who want to talk about take America back. That was not a good place to be. The cause of the civil rights movement was not a good place to be. But the issue is, how did we come through all of this? You know, I look at history as a traveler's diary and saying, you know, when you look down this road, then you see what the turns and twists, where we've been, what we've become. And
Where we've become is a little frightening.
where we've become now is frightening. However, what I absolutely love about the adventure of history is that we have the benefit of knowing that even if, as Claire Booth Luce said, history is just one damn thing after another, we have the benefit of knowing that we came through it. And that's what's important, how we came through it.
How we came through it. And here...
Glory Days was the first in this trilogy, and that's a panoramic history. Once again, African American history, 3,500 years kind of, so that we don't just start this story by any means. It does not just begin 400 years ago. This year, with the kidnap and importation of
I mean, you
20 people.
The things that are happening with children today is frightening, but you had quite an experience when you were a child.
Yes.
Talk
At 8,
to that.
Yes, at 8. In fact, I think one of the things that even there got us through that period of time is that we were told that we had the privilege of doing this. And so what I had the privilege of doing at 8 years old was being one of the 4 children who led the way for northern school desegregation, by the 4 of us being taken from an all-black school in Harlem to an all-white school in
You had to be
Upper
escorted,
Manhattan.
didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it was. Some people say it's the beginning of busing, but the bus was my father's car, and there were people who were, you know, when I think about these things, I go beyond the political, and I say, I don't want to hear your politics. I want to ask you about decency. How does a woman spit on another mother's child? Just let's be basic. Don't tell me, you know, what your problems are with what you think race means.
That must have been
Just
a very
go
difficult time
basic.
for you. I mean,
was.
Those people didn't want you at that school.
They did not, you know, they didn't want us on the planet. But they weren't the ones in charge of that. So, and some of them didn't know what they wanted, period. they just responded, you know, to, you know, forces of habit. This is my way to go, is my way of saying to parents today, you know, there is a way to educate children for success, celebrating everything and who we are, and understanding the way that children need to be nurtured for success. And that book is a wonderful book for all parents. It is Way to Go, The Backpack's Parent's Guide to Empowering Adventurous Young Minds.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And, you know, we so much have to rethink our past. You know, you've heard me say this 100 times. If we don't educate our children, the children of today, about their yesterday, we steal a piece of their tomorrow.
Yes, we do.
They have to understand what went on before them, and they can't let it happen again. There has to be respect and tolerance, and there just isn't. You know what I've been going through with Sybil Ludington. It's been crazy. Her biography was just riddled with errors, one after the other after another.
Your opening
It wouldn't have
paragraph.
happened, yes.
You know, I have a lot that I want to ask you about
Oh.
on this book that you've just done, you know, Patriot Hero, about the life and ride of Sybil Ludington. And, you know, before we get into the actual story of Sybil, let me ask you this, because you're talking about history and context and everything else. Tell us about what the landscape was, because this happened right around here in Putnam County. What was the landscape of 1777?
Yeah, you have to understand that her father came here. He leased 225 acres of land. So these were not poor people.
But what did it look like?
Oh,
When you walked
total
down the
wilderness.
road,
Dirt roads.
what did you see?
It was dirt roads, trees, barn here, a barn there, a house here, a house there. That's why the night of her ride. Today, it's very hard for us to appreciate what it meant. This girl had to go down little dirt roads, houses in the middle of acres of farmland. He was a colonel of the militia. These were farmers. When they were not shooting other people or getting shot at, they were trying to raise crops.
But we're for those people who haven't heard the story yet, I mean, you and I have had the privilege of sharing each other's work, so we've, you know,
we
gotten
sure
there.
have.
But for those of us, those who are watching, who haven't heard the story yet, I asked you about that landscape, you know, what the terrain looked like, you know, so that we could now come to then what was the political landscape of 1777 for those people who don't have that in mind.
You know it was male dominated, and you know that these were people who,
And it's a year after the Revolution.
Yeah, no, it's actually
It's
right
the
in the
Declaration
middle.
of Independence.
Yeah.
It's a year after the
So now,
Declaration.
1775 has come and gone. Paul Revere has done his famous ride, and now here we are in Westchester, Putnam County, Westchester Dutchess,
Soon to
the
be.
neutral country, and it's being patrolled by the militia and cowboys and skinners.
The British.
Yep. Well, the cowboys and skinners are roaming the area, attacking colonists, stealing from them. And it's a turbulent time because the revolution is right there. And what's happening now is we have the British around us, getting all kinds of reports, and the colonel is out fighting three groups, the cowboys, the skinners, and the
Who are the
British.
Skinners?
The Skinners also were, they were a group of bandits who used to steal, supposedly for the Patriots, while the cowboys stole for the British. After a while, they just all stole. And it was the colonel's job to make sure that he kept those people down.
So to put it in perspective, we're 1777.
Yep.
Declaration of Independence has been the last year, and it's ironic, we're talking as we tape this. This week is the anniversary of of Sybil Ludington's ride. So
Yep.
that's another thing, but we'll get there. So all of this is happening. There are a lot of people who, it's not about being patriots, it's about being those people who are shaking up society because this is a British colony. The British are saying, what the devil are you doing? We sent you over there, we gave you money to keep this going, we allowed you, I mean, I don't think the Native Americans were pleased, and they should have had something to say about this, but nevertheless, from their point of view,
they got ripped off too, big time.
They have been forever ripped off, and we can't not understand what the real price was that was paid for all of this.
The very important issue is not only were the British enemies to some of the patriots, their neighbors were, because there were loyalists.
There were
who
the
said,
loyalists.
Hey, the king is our king. And how dare you go against the king?
And indeed, the loyalists are exactly what they are, but the people we now call the patriots were the enemy.
Yes.
So to put it into context. So here we are in this turbulence.
Right.
And the night of April 26th, 1777.
We have a 16-year-old girl.
What happens that night? What's going on?
We have a 16-year-old girl who had just turned 16 3 weeks before the ride.
Okay.
She's home. 7 brothers and sisters, all younger, are upstairs asleep. And there's comfort in knowing that the colonel is there with her father, and he's fine, everything's fine. It's a rainy Sunday night, and a rider is approaching, and they hear someone coming to the door. They panic. There's a reward on the colonel's head.
A bounty.
Yeah, at any moment, someone could take this man out. So there's panic. There's a knock at the door, and it's a messenger. And he says he's from Gulselic-Silman, David Wooster, Benedict Arnold, famous generals. The colonel says, what's going on? And he said, 2,000 men have just marched through Connecticut, and they're burning the city of Danbury. We need your 400 men. And he's like, it's 9 o'clock on a Sunday night in April, planting season?
And you want me to call up 400
These guys
men?
are all asleep on their properties. You're not going to be able to call them because you have no idea where these men live. Some of them have 50 acres of land. How are you going to ride your horse and find their house in the middle of this? And then go to the next one,
rested? I mean, let's look at it from the horse's point of view, too.
And it's a pouring night. We already confirmed that the weather was horrendous. So this 16-year-old girl has to mount a horse, and she has to ride out in the night, yelling the fact that her father is needed. Cowboys, Skinners, and British. If any of those three heard, they would have raped or killed her to teach that colonel a lesson.
Or called, probably done something very publicly to her to make a lesson.
That's right, a lesson
her.
learned. So she rode from 9 o'clock on a Sunday night to the next morning. And it was...
And with her father telling her, don't go, probably.
Probably. Do we know that for sure? No. That's the big thing about my new book, is to try to sort out the embellishments. There's been so many fictitious stories, wonderful stories.
The new book is Patriot Hero,
That's right.
The Life and Ride of Sybil Ludington.
And the whole idea is to try to present her as the woman she was. And she was an amazing woman. Now, what happened was I wrote The Call to Arms 20 years ago. And recently...
Before you get to that call to arms, how did you even hear about this teenage girl from the 1700s named Sybil Ludington?
Drove by a sign, the infamous blue and gold sign on the side of the road.
The historic marker?
Yeah. I read the marker. It said she rode by this spot in 1777 to repel the British in Danbury, New York, and Danbury, Connecticut, with Colonel Henry Ludington. And I said, what? I had no idea. Went to the Mahopac Library. Andy Campbell, a good friend now, met me pretty much at the door. I asked him if they had information. He directed me to the vertical file, and it was a wonderful story about the 16-year-old girl. The only problem is almost every single article had the same paragraph. After her famous ride, Sybil Ludington married her childhood sweetheart, and then married Henry or Edward or Edmund Ogden, depended on the article, who was a lawyer in Catskill. She was the mother of 6 children, 4 boys, 2 girls.
Which tells us, all of that tells us also something else about the times. When we say women's rights or whatever, here we are, someone who has done this really heroic thing that did change the tide for what would become the United States, and we don't care enough about her to know the details of her life.
Those errors were repeated from 1935 to 1997 when I wrote this book. Now, worse than that, so I write this book, I get it out there, and I get all this things straightened out. It took me 3 years of digging and scraping and trying to figure out the story.
How does one do that? I mean, you're talking about someone who lived 200 years ago.
Yeah, I went to Washington, D.C., found pension papers that no one had, and signed by Sybil herself. And little by little, I found information in all different places, and I had to recoup all of this information and create a cradle-to-grave biography. No, I did that. Here we are, 2017. I go back to look online, and all those errors are back again. And people are saying the same thing. And although a lot of the things were corrected, a lot of them were not. And worse than that, they said, you know what? Sybil Ludington's a myth. She never existed. The battle in Connecticut was insignificant. Her father never even participated in it, and she never took a ride. I said, oh no. So then I went back and I had to go and try to straighten all of this information out again. So I decided I had to do another book. Another thing they were saying is that the people who were telling the stories, the memoirs from 1907, supposedly, the memoirs of her father, supposedly was the first mention. Well, I said, no, it's not the first mention of the ride. It was a Connecticut magazine article written by her nephew, if I can remember his name, and I will.
Well,
but
someone in the Ludington
someone in the Ludington family, who Lewis S. Patrick wrote this article, and that we thought were the first 2 mentions. Then we find that in 1880 there was an article written about the ride by a famous historian, a woman who wrote this great article, but Martha Lamb never gave
Who's
sources.
Martha Lamb? Why are we
Martha Lamb was a
referring to her?
famous historian from New York City. She wrote the history and origins of New York City, and in it she gives a whole recount of the ride, but she never gives sources.
What year was
This was in 1888.
Okay,
So
so
then-
that's still 111 years
Yep,
after the ride.
100 years. So naysayers are still saying, number 1, she didn't give sources, and number 2, it's still 100 years later. Yeah, dismiss it. The other 2,
Biblically, how long was it after the crucifixion that people were,
and they're
that
still-
these accounts are
right.
supposedly written?
right,
Yes.
that's right. So look at the Bible. Anyway, so then we, in the other 2, Willis Fletcher Johnson was hired to write the memoirs by 2 of the Ludingtons. They were Sybil's niece and nephew. Lewis S. Patrick was also a nephew. So they said, come on, this is all from the family. Well,
was the underlying thing why people wanted that level? I don't want to interrupt the story, but
Because they don't want to hear about a female Paul Revere. They wanted the male Paul Revere. They don't want to hear about a girl in the Revolutionary War who was a hero, because men were heroes. And they just didn't give the respect that they should have. And if it were a man, would they have been a little more careful about all the errors? I uncovered so many errors. There's more errors than reality in her biography. So I went to the New York Historical Society to find Martha Lamb's sources. Oh my God, Janus.
Is that where her papers are?
Yeah. I went to the man who's the head of the manuscript, and I talked to him about what I was trying to do. And he said, so you're looking for Ludington information? I said, yeah. He said, have you checked the Ludington family papers? I said, the what? And he pulls out this box, and the Ludington family papers have letters to and from the entire family, one as early as 1854.
So now you have to
Never
take
mind
up residence at the New York Historic.
And I did. I went there every day. Man, I had to learn how to park, know which side of the street, on what day I had to park on. But I went there every day for almost the entire summer. And the letters were spectacular. And on one of them, it said, to Martha Lamb, 1778. We got all the sources. William Pelletreau, history of Putnam County, to William Pelletreau. And what he did, and he is Charles Henry Ludington, the colonel's grandson, who said, you know what? My grandfather's getting ripped off. My grandfather was like incredible, and my Aunt Sybil was incredible. And nobody is saying anything about what they did. So he got together with his second cousin, Louis S. Patrick, and the two of them created a form for the Ludington family and sent it out to all the family members and said, please respond to this. Tell us what you know about my grandfather and about my Aunt Sybil. And they answered, and they were in the box. So I went through all the boxes. In fact, Charles Ludington's sister, older sister, went to the family reunions. She spoke with Sybil. So she got the story directly from Sybil herself.
Isn't this amazing?
It
when
is
you're
amazing.
doing this adventure
It was
called
just
history,
an adventure.
and you suddenly find the wind is at your back.
Yeah.
There's a certain
That's
point
right.
where
where it becomes wonderful, because then you start saying, Sybil, I know you're there, man. I'm with you. Guide me. And she did. She guided me in the first place to the pension papers for the first book, and then the second book, Jane Ludington, who was the wife of the great-great-great-grandson of Charles Ludington, who wrote that first letter in 1854. She's married to Charles Townsend Ludington, Jr. She went to the carriage house and found letters in a filing cabinet that were being eaten by mice, and she took them and donated them to the New York Historical Society. Never told anybody. In 2015, and they sat for 3 years before I got there. No one even knew they were there. I called Jane Ludington. I found her phone number. I called her and I said,
she must have been an elder by that time.
She is, and she's still alive and well.
Wow.
And I said, you know, I don't think, you may not remember me. I wrote a book called Call to Arms. She says, I have the Call to Arms. Vinny, I met you at the family reunion in 2001. I said, oh my God, yes, you did. And I said, those papers are amazing. Well, we spoke back and forth on the phone.
You know, when I was looking at the book, one of the things that really impressed me is that here we are talking about the letters and the papers, and you actually have some of them reprinted right here in the book.
Yes, they are. And unfortunately, some of the real powerful ones, like the one from 1854, I don't have in there because I didn't find them. The publisher already said, we'll publish your book, send us the manuscript. That manuscript is the one you helped me with, where we were going back and forth and back and forth. I got the whole manuscript together, I sent it to them, and then I found the letters.
The letters. So we have a part 2 coming.
So they said you can put you can
Or on
put
the
some of
website.
them in there, but it's a little too late because we already set it all up. So I added a lot of that information, but it was too late.
So
to
when
put in all
somebody
the
comes
letters.
out to one of your talks, you'll get to show them.
I have it on the screen.
Yes.
I show them. I have 19 talks in just April and May because that is a lot of information. And for people who really want to see it, the better news is go to the New York Historical Society, go upstairs to the library. I even give you the box number, the file number, so you can go and find it yourself.
You know, I'm looking at these letters, and one of the things, they always say that history is always about the present. And in that context, I'm going to take a little swerve here.
Yep.
I'm looking at these letters, the handwriting,
Yep.
and
The handwriting's beautiful.
the handwriting is beautiful, and I'm also thinking, you started this conversation about children and what families tell their children and everything else. And every time I hear this conversation about why children should no longer learn cursive, I say, are you out of your
no,
mind?
I know.
You know, are you really saying that a child should not be able to read a
What a
note
shame
that
it would have been
their
because
their grandparent leaves on the kitchen counter for them, the child isn't supposed to, and they're not supposed to be able to read? What are we going to need, a new Rosetta Stone?
every Ludington letter was legible.
Surely.
Everyone. Those Ludingtons knew how to
We
write.
never let knowledge go.
Janice,
That's
I
the
have bad
rule.
news for you. We have 2 minutes left.
We have 2 minutes.
So here's what I want. Here's what no one knows this better than you. Women need to be respected for who they are.
Yes.
Sybil Ludington lived for 23 years with her mother, raising 11 of her 12 children. She then married a 3-time Revolutionary War veteran. He took her away from the home to go live in Catskill, New York, to run a tavern. He died in 1799. He left her a single mother to raise a 13-year-old boy. Not only did she raise him, he became a lawyer and a New York assemblyman. She bought a tavern for $735, sold it for $2,200, 3 times the money, so that she could raise this boy. She then took this boy and his wife and their baby. That baby was Edmund Augustus Ogden, who went to West Point and gave his life in a battle in Kansas, trying to found Fort Henry. Died saving women and children. When she was 73 years old, one of her father's soldiers came to her and said, I need money. I need to apply for a pension. Can you tell in a letter what I did? Did it. 77 years old. Her son dies in front of her. She's stuck. She doesn't know what to do. She applies for a pension. They turn her down because she can't show her marriage license, and she dies. Janus, an amazing daughter, an amazing wife, an amazing mother, an amazing patriot. Everything about her needs to be celebrated.
A real shiro.
Yep, a shiro. Janice, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for pulling out some information from me. Always a pleasure to have you here. It's
Thanks
a treat.
for having me. Dan.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being with one of my dearest friends. One-on-one with Janus Adams.